And welcome everybody. Glad you're here. Thanks for spending a few minutes today for the quiz. Go ahead and sign in. The PIN number's at the top of the screen. All right, glowing owl, focused leopard, fuzzy unicorn, genius meerkat, rocky sphinx. Oh my goodness, here they come. It's great to see everybody. Really, really is. If you're just joining us for the first time, we hold these quizzes every single Sunday at 11 a.m. Pacific time. Adjust your time zone appropriately for that. And we're going to focus on OSPF here. Again, my name is Keith Barker, and if this is the first time for you joining us for a live event, great to have you. We're going to start in just a few minutes. All right, Nick003, Genius Meerkat. I've got my eye on you. Let me take care of a little bit of housekeeping, and then I'll be right back and we'll start. All right, all caught up. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And thank you for the super stickers for Blendinator and Soren. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Very, very kind. All right, let me do an intro and we'll get this show on the road. And welcome everybody. This is Keith Barker coming at you for another live quiz. This one's on OSPF. I wish everybody luck. And without further ado, here we go with question number 1. It's on OSPF, and the first question in the randomized order is this. What is the default administrative distance for OSPF? Oh my gosh, the faster you answer and the more accurately you answer, the more points you get. So no pressure, but knock it out of the park. I'm also going to say it's not 90. That's a good AD for like EIGRP. It's also not 120. That's the default for RIP. I'm just going to leave the other two out there. All right. So, oh my goodness, just crushing it. So we brought up an interface. This is from Packet Tracer and did like show IP protocols. I was going to show you right here the distance, which is the default distance for OSPF, which indeed is 110. Whew, we are smoking. Here we go. That's question 1 of 12. All these questions are fairly straightforward, between 60 and 90 seconds apiece. Here is question number 2. It's multiple select, so choose at least 2 answers. Actually, they want 3 exact answers. And based on the output here, which of the following are true? And if you want to join the game, that's the way to do it. Just go ahead to kahoot.it or use the app and put in the PIN number. And the appropriate way to answer is in the game. All right. Wow. Okay. So we got a lot of great answers on the board. At least, how is this possibly true? Let's bring in the diagram while I take a look at the answers here. So this is actually off the same router. And let's talk about why the correct answers are correct as a little bit of a tutorial. Let me bring out a pen for this. All right. So at least 3 routers are on the same subnet. The reason that's true for at least one of these is because here we have a full DR other relationship. So the first one states the adjacency type, and then the second one shows the state or the role of the other one. And so on a multi-network segment, one guy is going to be the designated router, one guy is going to be the backup designated router, and everybody else for that one network segment, I'm talking right here, where this segment happens to be, this other one's not going to be a DR, it's not going to be a BDR, it's going to be a DR other. And if we have multiple DR others, meaning they're not a DR and not a BDR, everybody gets a full adjacency, and I'll put that in black. Everybody gets a full adjacency with the DR and the BDR. Just like that. That's the logical adjacencies, but they are not going to form a full adjacency with a DR other to another DR other. There's no need for it. And so there's also going to be an adjacency here. And that's why there's at least 3 routers on the same subnet. So if looking at, in this case, we're looking at the neighbor 4444. If there's a full adjacency and this DR other, that means we have at least 3 devices there if we're using the defaults for priority and nobody's bowing out. So that's why that one's true. R5 is a DR or BDR on gig 01. And we're looking at R5 and gig 01. Oh yeah, right there. So every segment needs to have a DR and a BDR, and if he's has a full adjacency with the DR other, and the other guy out in that same interface is a DR, he's actually a BDR on that segment. So if you logically draw it out, now the goal on this is to help reinforce the concepts of how this works. It's important. It's important not just for a certification. It's also important if you're in a network and you're trying to troubleshoot, why is this happening or why isn't that happening? Understanding the roles and how they play out is important. And so each of these questions I put out there are intended to ferret out the understanding. Do you understand this, and do you understand how it works? And let's see here. All of R5's IP interfaces are included in OSPF, and that's because of the network statement right here. That's basically that wildcard mask that wildcard mask says that I don't care what the IP address is. If it's IPv4 and it's on an interface, that directly connected network is going into OSPF, and it's going to be in area 0. All right, great work. Let me clear that all off, and let's continue on. I'll move that screen out of the way. Also, yesterday, I want to thank everybody who showed up for Office Hour. What a great session. It was about OSPF, and we did OSPF and HSRP and some troubleshooting. It was a party. So every 10 o'clock every Saturday, you can join me on Discord for Office Hours, and we have a new topic every week. So it's super fun. All right, here's question 3 of 12. 3 of 12. Sorry about my voice. When advertising the same exact IP subnet, which of the protocols listed is going to win a spot in the routing table? And I also want to thank Kelvin for earlier today spending some of his very valuable time in proofing these questions with me, reviewing them, confirming them. I also want to wish Kelvin, who is the admin on our Discord server, a happy birthday. Tomorrow's his birthday. So Kelvin, thank you. You rock. And there was a question in the queue asking, what's the topic on Discord today going to be? And Kelvin is going to discuss netconf and restconf in the Beyond CCNA room on the Discord server today. So join us right after this quiz if you'd like to join that. Okay, when advertising the same exact IP subnet, and I'm kind of a visual learner, so let's go ahead and pretend it's the 10.67.83.0/ let's make it a 28-bit mask. So if you need to learn about IPv4 and subnetting and how to do it and what it means, check out the playlist called Subnet Saturdays right here on YouTube on my channel. It is free, and I think you'll love it. And you'll be able to answer any kind of subnetting questions and understand how it works if you watch those 11 videos. Okay, so if this network is advertised, that exact network is advertised from, and a router learns it, so we'll say R1 is the one who's going to learn it from all these different sources. If he learns it via external BGP, that's going to come in with an administrative distance of 20 by default. And the static route if it has a next hop address of like an IP address, like if it says IP route to get to 10.67.83.0 with the 28-bit mask, use the next hop of 17.9.2.4, whatever it is. That static route by default is going to have an AD of 1. That's really low. Keep your eye on that one. Internal BGP has a default administrative distance of 200. And OSPF has a default administrative distance of 110, I believe. I've been looking at a lot of numbers today. Yeah, that's right. So RIP is 120, ISIS is 115, OSPF is 110, based on a previous question. So that's the one that would win right here. And if you're wondering, well, how do we control who gets into the routing table? And once they're in the routing table, which ones are chosen, which routes are chosen? Check out the video called Why Routes Have to Win Twice. And that will walk through the exact details of how routes get in the routing table based on AD. And then once they're in the routing table, how the longest match after they're in the routing table, how the longest match of whatever routes are in the routing table are used. That is important information to know for Windows, for Linux, for Mac OS, for Cisco routers, for Juniper routers, for HP devices, for big IP appliances with F5, for Citrix, for you name it. Those concepts are going to be true as long as IPv4 is on the planet. And someday when IPv4 is gone, guess what? IPv6 is here, and those same concepts are true with IPv6 as well. All right, let's see who's in first place so far. Smiling Camel, followed by Fast Elephant, Snowy Emu, Focused Leopard, and Yellow Kitten. I have one thing to say about that. Meow. Moving forward, here we go. Question 4 of 12. Which of the following best describes the open shortest path first routing protocol? And the way this works is the faster you answer correctly, the more points you get. And I'd like to thank all the admins and moderators, especially at the moment, who are helping keep our chat clean and working. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Also, everybody who's studying for their networking skills and getting better, way to go. My hat's off to you. It's worth it. It's worth it to learn the basic concepts and then keep on studying and keep on getting better and then apply those skills. And at some point, if you continue studying and continue practicing, you'll be paid for those skills. At the beginning, it feels like I'm studying and learning, but I'm not being paid for this. And that's my YouTube experience, by the way. I love doing this, but this isn't my full-time job. I do this because I want to do it, and I love doing it. I love helping other people. My full-time gig is over at CVT Nuggets, where they do pay me there. But my opportunity here is to help a lot of people, as many as I can. So which of the following best describes OSPF? Well, it's a link state routing protocol, which means basically all the routers are sharing little tidbits of information about all their links. So R1 shares its information, R2 shares its information, and then all the routers in the same area, like area 0, every router is going to have, for area 0, the exact same copy of the link state database of all the details. So it's the link state routing protocol, and it could care less. I'm talking about it couldn't care less about A, B, or C as far as the, classes of addresses and the default masks that may or may not be on those address classes. It could care less. And that's a great way of remembering classless. Where older protocols, like from decades ago that are still around, like RIP, especially RIP version 1, oh, it cares. It's actually it's a class-full routing protocol. All right, OSPF, classless link state routing protocol. Great job, everybody. Let's continue on. All right, smile. Oh, Snowy Emu has moved up to first place. Competition's on. Here's question 5. What is the layer 4 protocol that's used by OSPF? Okay, it is 89. Is that pretty important to memorize? I would say that's probably not too critical to like commit to memory long term, but it is important to be aware of how protocol stacks work in general. And so if we've got the protocol stack that we use and love today, which is the TCP/IP protocol stack, not the OSI reference model, not literally the DoD model, although DoD created the TCP/IP protocol stack effectively and among friends, we would never refer to this as the OSI reference model. We'd say there's the physical layer, there's the data link layer. I'll put these out here to layer 2, layer 1, layer 3 is the network layer, and then layer 4 is the transport layer. And then up here, we don't say levels 5, 6, or 7 anymore, not among friends, because we're not using any protocol stacks that keep those separate. So what in the OSI reference model would be layers 5, 6, and 7, we just call the application layer. So applications would be things like DNS, HTTP, HTTPS, other applications like that, services. So if we took a look at an OSPF hello at layer 4, we would see up here it's not using TCP, it's not using UDP, it's not using EIGRP's protocol, which is 88 at layer 4. It is literally using protocol number 89, and that's 89 in decimal. Okay, all right. I'm always curious. In fact, I'm also, yesterday in the office hour, we were looking at some detail regarding the link state advertisements with OSPF. And I looked at one round and I thought, why do we have a LSA type 5? And then somebody from the group said, oh yeah, you're injecting a default route, and that's an external LSA. But anyway, you don't need to worry about LSAs too much for CCNA. Just think of a link state advertisement as a little bit of information about some routes. And everybody in the same area is going to have the same information about all those little LSAs. And that way they can have a full picture and they can calculate the best path through a network. All right, clearing off my screen. Let's see who's on top at the moment. Whoa, Snowy Emu, still there. Followed by Yellow Kitten, Brave Dolphin, Glowing Owl, and Adorable Koala. Aww. Here's question 6. Having a lot of fun. It's multiple select. Make sure you choose 2 exact answers. No more, no less. Which OSPF network type uses a designated router, a DR? And I've got a little tip for you. I know a lot of people have answered already, but if it has the word point in it, it does not use a DR. Just saying. If it has the word point in the network type, it does not use a DR. All right, so I assume that everybody who answered on red and yellow, the 24 and 18 answers, did that before I made that announcement. So if we have a network like this one, Ethernet, by the way, is going to have a default network type. So this is R5. If we look at interface gig 0/1, this is a show IP OSPF interface for gig 0/1, like that. There's a lot of really great information here. I mean, no, it's a lot of output. It's like, oh, too long, didn't read. Well, if you're working on a network and you're working with Cisco devices or Juniper devices or HP, it pays to spend a moment looking at the output. And so as far as the network type, look at this. Network type broadcast. Even if we never saw this output before, we could probably ferret out that this router has the network type of broadcast. And that's the default for any kind of Ethernet interface. For serial, we're going to be using point-to-point, or if we modify it, point-to-multipoint, if you've got some things that need it. But anytime you have the keyword, anytime we have a network that is broadcast or non-broadcast, BROADCAST, that's going to involve a designated router. And if you have 2 devices on that same segment, there will be a backup designated router. And if you have a 3rd device on that same segment, it will be a DR other, meaning it won't be a designated router, it won't be a backup designated router, and that's how it works. And so the difference between a broadcast and non-broadcast for an OSPF network type is that with a broadcast, it's assuming it's going to see everybody's multicast hellos at 224.0.0.5. That's the multicast address, the local multicast address for OSPF. And if it's non-broadcast, it's assuming that it has to either have the administrator train a router with a neighbor statement saying, hey, your neighbor is, and you point to the IP address. And that's the way it primarily can learn about its neighbors. There's also a little bit behind the scenes about some dynamic options with that if one side is pointing. But in either case, broadcast or non-broadcast, both of those are going to use a DR or a BDR and a DR other if there's a 3rd device. And everything else, point to point, point to multi-point, is going to use no DR on the network segment that they're connected to. All right, let me move that out of the way. And Packet Tracer, oh my gosh, this is Packet Tracer. So it's free, it's amazing. It does most everything you'd ever want to do at the CCNA level for practice. And you can get a free copy of it just by going to netacad.com, signing up for a free account, downloading the latest version, and have at it. Build your own topologies in a heartbeat. So this is the one we built yesterday for the OSPF discussion in the office hour. So I put the framework of this together like a half hour before the office hour, and then we just labbed up OSPF and talked about what has to match and how it works and did a practical example. And we did all that like in less than an hour. Okay, moving that out of the way. Glad you're all here. Moving on, here we go. Snowy Emu, still in first place. Congratulations to everybody who is putting in any time towards studying and getting better. My hat is truly off to you. It is all worth it. It's worth it. It's not going to be easy, but you'll be way better off by learning the technology than if you didn't. All right, after pressing enter in this upcoming diagram, what is R5 going to be using as its active OSPF router ID? And I want to thank Dave yesterday in the office hour for bringing up a few great questions, which gave us an opportunity to elaborate. And then I created this question based on Dave. So, Dave, thank you. I'm going to rule out one answer. The red answer that's all 255s, that is not the active router ID. You just take that one off the table. Also, you can find all these quizzes. What I do is I'm recording them locally. After the live quiz is over, I pull it down, and then I edit to a nice, concise, like 20 to 30 minutes, the actual whole quiz and all the answers and the elaboration. And I put that in my quiz playlist on YouTube. So just go to the Keith Barker channel, the quiz playlist, and enjoy. What? What's going on here? No. What Keith told me, I'll talk about myself in the third person here. Let me bring up a pen. And let me do this. All right, here's what Keith told me. Keith told me there is a certain order when we start the routing process with OSPF. There's a certain order that it uses to identify its router ID. And the first one is it configured with, the router ID command, blah, 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 blah. If that's configured, that takes place. Okay, so if it's not there, then it's going to be the highest IP address on a loopback interface. Now, it's not the highest loopback interface number, like loopback 0 is lower than interface, or a loopback 10 is higher than loopback 5. Not the actual interface, but the actual IP address. For example, we had loopback 0, and this IP address was 5, let's use different numbers, 9.9.9.9, and we had loopback 1, and its IP address was 8.8.8.8, which is higher. It's based on the IP address. So regarding loopback interfaces, the highest IP address would be loopback 0, its highest IP address on a loopback. And if there are no loopbacks, like, hey, I didn't create a loopback, I don't need a loopback, I feel strongly about not using loopbacks, whatever reason you decided not to use a loopback, if there isn't a loopback and you didn't configure a router ID, it's then going to use the highest IP on another layer 3 interface. When I mean by another, I mean you don't have any loopbacks, so some other layer 3 interface. That could be a switched virtual interface on a multi-layer switch. It could be a sub interface if you're doing router on a stick. It could be a traditional layer 3 interface on a router if you're just doing traditional routing. And I see. So I wanted to explain this real quick. And the question still comes up, well, Keith, how come this is the answer then? If you demonstrated configuring 555, this one right here, on the interface. You configured it. Shouldn't it take place? And I asked about the active router ID. I think this deserves a quick demo. It'll be fast. But I did want to reinforce the pecking order for choosing a router ID. So let's bring in a volunteer. I've got a volunteer. He's right here. This is R5. See, his router ID is 5550. I'm sorry, his router ID is 5.5.5.5. And that's probably because of this. It's probably because that's the highest IP address on a loopback when OSPF started. So now that it's running, it has that router ID of 5555. So this is OSPF process ID 1. So we'll do a config T. We'll go into router, spelled correctly, OSPF process ID 1. And then we'll configure a router ID, and we'll make this 55.55.55.55. And this is the point where the question is, after pressing enter, what is R5 going to use as its active router ID? It says, I'm not changing it. I don't want to botch up the whole network. But if you want to use the new router ID, you need to do this, clear IP OSPF process, and then say yes, and that will change the router ID. So if we do a do, I'm just doing a do command because I'm in configuration mode. So do and show IP OSPF, that'll work. See how it still has the router ID of 5555? And it will remain that way until we reboot this router or we restart the OSPF process, which we can do right here with a clear IP OSPF process, press enter, YES for yes, and boom, it just reset. And now if we do a show IP OSPF, press enter, it's now using the new router ID. Don't shoot the messenger. But I wanted to make sure you knew that's how it works. And I wanted to also reinforce the order that the router ID is selected when OSPF first starts. Just think about that from the router's perspective. When OSPF first starts up, at that moment, is there a router ID configured? If there isn't, what's the highest IP address on a loopback? If there aren't any loopbacks, then what is the highest IP address on any interface, layer 3 interface? And if there is no IP address anywhere, OSPF is going to do this. It's going to say, I can't even really start the OSPF process correctly because there's no available router ID. And that's what is going to happen. All right. Fantastic. Lots of fun there. We'll bring that out of the way. And labbing up is the CCIE secret. A lot of people ask, what is the secret to getting a CCIE besides months of study? The secret is lab everything up. And then when you see results that are new or unexpected, you can say, why did that happen? And then dig in further and just enjoy the journey every step of the way. Okay, so sorry about that, but 65 of you, 24 of you got it right. We'll focus on that. All right, that was a little bit of a sneaky question, but with the intent of training. All right, question 8 of 12. Default-information space originate is being used on R2 in this topology. R2 is just right of the firewall, but R2 is not, I repeat, it's not advertising a default route into the OSPF domain. That's over on the left. Why? Why is R2 not advertising a default route? Yes, Kelvin, I agree. The secret is context-sensitive help. Absolutely. Nice work for the majority of people. Got that right on. I remember working maybe like 10, 12 years ago, as in somewhere on the East Coast, working at a government location, and we were deploying something that I'd never deployed before, ever. And they just asked if we would work on it. And even though I'd never touched this gear before, it wasn't Cisco, it wasn't Juniper, it was something else that I'd never touched. I was able to, with context-sensitive help, on that strange gear, I was able to, and some online documentation, I was able to go ahead and make it all work. And because of context-sensitive help, which is amazing. All right, so let's bring in this topology for a moment. And let's imagine that R6, this is one giant OSPF domain, and R6 is configured with OSPF. In fact, let's just take a peek. And let me bring this in real quick. And let's do a show run pipe section. This is a great way to just see portions of your running config without having to look through the whole thing and scroll up and down. So we'll do a section router. And there's our router configuration for OSPF. So it has default information originate. But if we look at show IP route, this router itself does not have, let me make it bigger. This router itself does not have a default route. And with default information originate, this command right here, as it is, if it's sort of like saying, I don't have a default route myself, so I don't want to lie to the rest of the network and let them know about, hey, send your traffic this way, because effectively that's what default information originate is doing. On a production gear, there's also an option of always, where you can type in default-information space originate space always, and that will advertise a default route to the rest of the OSPF domain, whether or not the router with this command has a default route. In Packet Tracer, they don't implement that additional option. But if we wanted to just prove this real quick, if we went back to our topology, let's go to R1. So here on R1, if we look at the routing table, and this can look at OSPF routes, show IP route. Please limit the output just to OSPF learned routes, I'm going to say. And you notice it does not have a default route, and that's because R6, which is over here, never advertised the default route because he doesn't have a default route. So we can fix that on R6 by adding a static default route, or adding a default route. So a static route, a default route can be implemented as a static route, and that's what I'm going to do right here. So IP route to get to anywhere. That is the syntax for a default route. The next hop is going to be 23.1.2. Whatever the real next hop is. And assuming that next hop is reachable, if we now do a show IP route, we'll just do static, saying please show us just your static routes. Now it has the static default route in its routing table, and as a result, because of this command, right here, R6 is now advertising a default route out to the rest of the network. So now if we go back to R1, my hands will never leave my arms. A moment ago, it did not have a default route, and now it does. An external type 2. You don't really need to worry about an external type 2 and what that means as an LSA type 5 or anything like that. But what you do need to be aware of is that the default information originate without the always keyword will only advertise a default route if the router running that command in its OSPF configuration has a default route. So now the whole OSPF domain's happy. They all know about how to forward, they have a default route. So anything that doesn't more explicitly match in the routing table, like if this device right now pinged 50.40.30.10, there's no longer match in the routing table, so the last ditch effort is the default route. I call it the Obi-Wan Kenobi route. Help us, Obi-Wan. You're our only route that we have a chance of you. So anyway, all right, moving over, and move that over, and move that over. Oh my gosh, is networking fun? Networking is super fun, and a lot of you did super great on that. Thanks for giving me a moment to elaborate. Okay, top of the heap, Snowy Emu. Congratulations to everybody who is here. We are rounding down here. And question 9 of 12, place the OSPF neighbor states in the correct order. Good luck, everybody. All right, the order. Look at this. This is fun. I added a few extra terms because I wanted to make a teaching moment out of this as well. So here we go. If we have two OSPF speakers, and that's a fancy way of saying two devices that are running OSPF, let's have R1, just because I love that, and R2, just because it's so creative. So I've got R1 and R2, and they're both connected on the same network segment. Let's just chat for a moment about what would need to be in place if these guys were going to form a full and working adjacency. Here, this is just like from my mouth to your ears, what has to match in order for these guys to be a neighbor. They have to agree on the IP network. So if router 2 thinks, oh, this is the 10.12 network, and R1 thinks it's the 10.21 network, they're not going to neighbor up. They need to agree on the IP network that they are commonly adjacent or will be adjacent on. They also need to agree on the timers. So with timers, there are some defaults in place, which are pretty darn handy. If we, let's do this real quick. Let's bring in a router and just take a look at the timers. So this is R1, again in Packet Tracer, all free. I've got also in my, if you go to thekeithbarker.com, I've got 20 or 30 Packet Tracer labs if you want to practice troubleshooting, configuring, all that. There's 20 or 30 there to play with. But if we do a timers, if we do a show IP OSPF neighbors, that's going to show me, I know I have OSPF running on these two interfaces because I've got neighborships across. So if we look at the details for one of those interfaces, like show IP OSPF interface. Now, the show command can give us a lot of different information. We could do a show interface, and that's going to focus on just the general interface and packets and so forth that have gone through. If we do a show IP interface brief, that'll show us a reduced version of that. If we do a show IP OSPF interface, it's just showing us different information, sometimes the same information, but different groupings of information. So the way you get really good at which command would I run, the certification exam, they're not going to ask you, have you memorized all the commands? No, but do you understand how this works and what the configuration should look like? That's the kind of thing that you should be aware of. So show IP OSPF interface and enter. Actually, let me tag on the interface. Let me say interface gig 0/1. All right, and they'll just give us that one interface. So here it's showing us that the timers right here have to match. That these are the default timers for a broadcast network, an OSPF network type of broadcast. And so if they match, that's great. The IP network has to match between them. So this is the 10.12.0 network because the mask there, 24 bits. What else needs to match to make this work? What else needs to match is, see here. The area. Yeah, that needs to match. The area number. So this router on this segment thinks that it's area 0. So if router 2 thought, this is area 2 or 1 or 5 or whatever, it didn't match up, it wouldn't work. Authentication has to match. So there's no authentication by default, but we could do something like this. We could do a good way of seeing that is show IP OSPF. Just show IP OSPF, that'll show us. And here it's showing us that for area 0, the backbone area, that the area has no authentication. So they both need to agree on that. And if we were using authentication, whatever flavor of authentication we're using, we'd also have to then supply appropriate passwords on both sides so they could accept each other's hello and become adjacent. What else needs to match? IP network address is one. We have the timers, the area number, authentication. Also MTU is a factor. That's the maximum transmission unit for a frame, or it depends on what we're looking at, but a frame of data. So sometimes on a multi-layer switch with a switched virtual interface, it's got like a 1504 and a router might have 1500, and sometimes that can cause grief. So we can tell OSPF to ignore that, but by default, it cares about that. And to see what the MTU is, this is gig 0/1. We can do a show interface all by itself for gig 0/1. Now you could just do show interface, press enter, and then scroll through all the interfaces. I'm just asking it to show me the interface characteristics just for that one interface. And there it is. It's still a lot of output, but near the top here, notice the MTU is 1500 bytes. So that needs to match. And by default, they have two routers on Ethernet. They're both Cisco. Very likely they're going to match using the defaults. If you connect to another device, or like a Juniper or HP or a multi-layer switch with an SVI, it may be different. So IP network, timers, area number, authentication, MTU. Let's see if I'm missing anything else major. Let me scroll up a little bit here and look at this interface. Oh, the network type. Yeah, let's put that there too, because that's applicable. So I'm going to put network type. Now there's some wiggle room there, but if you're a CCNA, no wiggle room. So for network type, if one side says it's a broadcast network and the other side says it's a point-to-point, that means one side is going to be expecting somebody to be a designated router and a backup designated router, and the other side is going to say, hey, no DR needed, and they will not become fully adjacent, because they don't agree on that fact. So we'll leave the minutia as far as how you could get around that by tweaking a few things and timers and so forth. However, let's just say that network type is also one of those. How many is there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I would say those are 6 common elements for an OSPF neighborship if you want it to work. If you don't want it to work, just don't run OSPF and it won't work. All right, let me clear that off and let me move that out of the way. Thanks for spending some time with me today. We have just a few questions to go. So on the top, we still have Snowy Emu. Refuses to be moved. Nice. Here's question 10 of 12. Which wildcard mask only cares about matching on the very first octet of an IP address? And while you're answering that, David D, if I've done this many times and I'd like to offer it to you too, if you have a certain area on the blueprint, certain section or subsection that you would like to review with me, I would be happy to schedule an event on Discord where we just invite the world to join us, and it'll just be you and me if you want to do this, and we'll focus on the topic that you're having challenges with. Again, not disclosing anything from the exam, but just the technical areas, and I'd be happy to help you. So DM me directly on Discord if you want to do that, and we'll schedule a time and we'll do it. All right, I don't think I've ever seen such a fantastic response on the correct answer. It's just great. Which wildcard mask only cares about matching on the first octet of an IP address? And boy, fantastic work right there. So the 0 says, so think of a wildcard mask as all the bits. This is in decimal, but really it's, behind the scenes it's binary. And this wildcard mask, if the bits are on, think about wild and that's wrong color. Wild and carefree. So if you see a wildcard bits that are on, just think wild, I don't care. And so if we had an address, like if we did a network statement in OSPF, in fact, let's just do it real quick. As an example. So this is R1, and it's currently no router OSPF1. It's not running OSPF anymore. We can verify that with a do show IP protocols. Yep, no RIP, no OSPF, no EIGRP, no BGP. Nothing is running on this for a routing protocol. So if we did a do show IP interface brief, and then we said router, OSPF1. Let's give it a router ID just for grins because we can. We'll say it's 1.1.1.1, although it would have picked that up from the loopback. But in the future, if we create a new loopback and it has a higher IP address, we want it to stick at this IP address. That's a good practice. And then let's go ahead and add in, let's add in any interfaces that begin with 10. So the network statement would look like this, network 10 dot, I don't care, because it's not going to check on those last 3 octets. And then the wildcard mask would say, I do care about matching on that first octet of 10, but for that second octet, I don't care. I'm wild, it could be anything. The third octet, I don't care. I'm wild, it could be anything. And for the fourth octet, it could be anything. And then we'll simply say anything that matches, anything that starts with 10 is going to be an OSPF, and we're going to tuck them into area 0. Just like that. And we should have some neighborships that come up if we have any neighbors off of those interfaces, which we do, that too. So then if we do a show IP protocols, again, it's going to show us our network statement. So handy. It's like, there it is. And then if we do a show IP OSPF interface on a production, on a real device, it would show us, we'd have an option for brief, which I love, but show IP OSPF interface will still work. We scroll through it. So that's going to show us that we have exactly 2 interfaces that both started with 10. There's gig 00. There's gig 01, and the reason they both came up, they're both included, is because the interface IP addresses both begin with 10. And now, that doesn't mean that it's an 8-bit network. It's whatever networks are attached to those interfaces. So on gig 0/1, it's the 10.12.0 network that would make it into OSPF. And on gig 00, it'd be the 10.13.0 that would be advertised in those link state advertisements across the OSPF domain or OSPF area. And that's how that works. All right, lots of different ways of doing that. And that is certainly one of them. That's the one Cisco wants you to know for sure, though. And let's click on next. Ooh, Snowy Emu is over 11,000. Brave Dolphin, Yellow Kitten, Glowing Owl, and Amazing Otter. Love it. Okay, we've got 2 more questions, and then we're done. And if you want to join us afterwards on Discord, Kelvin is going to be presenting some amazing information on NetConf and RESTConf, which you won't want to miss if you're interested in network automation. Okay, so what has to... Oh my gosh, this is randomized. I'm so sorry for giving away the answers to this like less than 5 minutes ago. Have a good time. The faster you answer correctly, the more points you get. No pressure. Go, 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 go. All right, nice. I am very pleased. We've already discussed this in a previous question. I also wanted to, again, thank everybody who's here, who is participating in this live event, and it's awesome. I also am looking at the chats as between questions, and I realize that failure in life is a real thing. And I fortunately got my first CCIE back in 2001, which is a long time ago. That's like, what, 2 decades ago now? Yeah, over 20 years. In 2001, and I got it the first time. And the reason I got it the first time was because I had friends, and I had a community, and I had like 8 months of 4 or 5 hours a day, 4 or 5 days a week, just labbing it up and practicing. And so if you're willing to put in the work, sometimes you have good results. So that's the good part. But as far as not passing, check this out. 2 years later, like 2003, I made an attempt at the CCIE security. And I thought, oh, I'm a CCIE. I've never, ever since that experience, I don't take anything for granted. Is because if a person has a Cisco Certified Internet Network Expert certification, it means, yeah, you could learn some stuff, right? And you can study and you can apply yourself and you can learn it. Maybe for some people it takes longer or shorter. But I went in and I thought, okay, I'm all brushed up on my security with firewalls and VPNs and all that good stuff. And I did really good on the firewalls and VPNs and stuff, but I got my lunch handed to me on the basic fundamentals of routing and switching. I got beat up because of BGP. So in my first lab, I was like all over BGP, like prefix lists and distribution lists and filtering and prepending and all this, cool stuff you can do with BGP. And then 2 years later, because I hadn't brushed up back on that part, and it was on the blueprint, my own fault. I just thought, oh yeah, I've got that, I know that, and I lost a big chunk of network connectivity because one thing I did in BGP that I wasn't paying attention to, and I failed it. So then I went back a second time, like a few months later. You had to wait like 30 days back then. So I went back a month later. The IE exam is the practical exam. When you go and do the lab, it's expensive, or it was for me, especially at that time. So I went back and I tried it again. I failed it a second time. I thought, I'm done. Give me the world's smallest violin. So sad. Like, Keith Barker, you know what? You deserve it. You deserve everything you get. And I also don't deserve everything good I get. I'm very fortunate. But so and I apologize about taking up time on the stream. I'll get back to the questions in a moment. But it's important to realize that everybody has their own pace, right? And if you're studying and there's a failure, if you get back up again, you can do it. I mean, you may get knocked down. Look at Abraham in the U.S. and in the United States. Abraham Lincoln I think he failed like at formal elections of some type 17 times. This is a man where like, no, we don't want you. No, hate the hat. No, don't like the beard. No, don't like your politics. No, don't like, over and over and over. And this guy, thank goodness, came back and, won. He won the presidential election and changed the course of history for a lot of people. And so that's fantastic. So I'm not comparing a CCA to winning the presidential election, but I went back the third time, more humble. And I said to myself, before I went back, I'm going to pretend like I'm going to practice like I've never won, like I've never been a CCIA. And so I labbed it all up. I practiced. I went back in. And by the time I got back to the airport in San Jose, which is where I took it at the time, I checked online and it had been graded already and I had passed. I was like, well, I still got chills. Okay. So if you're failing at something, don't let it stop you. Right? You've got a lot of people that are here to support you. I'm one of them. I'm happy. We can't disclose anything on the CCNA exam, like I got this question and why is that answer? We can't do that, but we can talk a lot about any of the topics, how it really works. And the cool thing is the knowledge that you're learning right now and you're studying in CCNA is going to be helpful for you when you get to software defined anything, because behind the scenes, guess what? With IPv4, ARP is not going away. Routing is not going away. We're putting overlays on all these networks, but the basic functions are not going away. And so it's going to be important to know. All right, off of my horse. If any of you are studying for your CCNA, you've had some failures or what have you, and you want to do a session with me, what we'll do is we'll benefit the whole community. So if you want to have a session with me, we'll put it on we'll go to a Discord room, we'll schedule it. We'll spend an hour, pretty tight hour, on a topic or a subject that you'd like more detail on, meaning you've already studied it a little bit, you just want to brush up and test your understanding, and we'll put everybody else on mute, and it'll be just you and I. And then everybody else can benefit from that, and at the end, we usually take a few questions. So that offer is open. I'm available. I've done that maybe 3 or 4 times, but I don't remember turning anybody down. Like, I don't recall ever somebody saying, hey, can I have an hour of your time, and we'll do a study session on this topic that I'm really struggling with. I don't think I've ever turned anybody down. All right, so I'm available. Okay. My full-time gig is CBT Nuggets, but I do enjoy spending somewhere between 10 and 20 hours a week on my YouTube efforts to help people who want to get their CCNA and beyond. All right, moving on. This is the last question. What is the priority order for selecting a router ID in OSPF? Oh my gosh. We have covered this as well. The faster you answer correctly, the more points you get. Here's Keith Barker going silent for a few seconds. And Mark, I'll take that question in just a minute. Boom! This is when OSPF first comes up. Configured router ID, done deal. No configured router ID, the highest IP on a loopback interface, done deal. No loopback interfaces, the highest IP address on any other interface that you may have on that device, and that is going to be the router ID that it is going to use. All right, let's take a look at the podium. Congratulations, everyone. $15,000 points. All right. Oh my gosh. So good. So good. So proud of everybody. Thanks for being here. These were the 3 most difficult questions. This top one, that was a little bit of a, that was the tough one because you have to clear the OSPF process. And then based on the output, which of the following are true, that was regarding OSPF neighborships and how many DRs are there and so forth, which is also a little bit, very thoughtful question. And then the layer 4 protocol. Don't worry about that one. But Fantastic. And if I could just get some feedback from you, that'd be great. So on your app, or if you're logged on to the website to the game interface, go ahead and give me some feedback. And here's what I would like to do. Let me bring up this camera right there. I'm not talking the right camera today. Oh, also, for the recorded version of this, that's it. Everybody will see you in the next live quiz, and the recordings of these are all in my playlist at YouTube. So until the next event, take care. And that's what's going to make it on the recording. All right, now the rest of this time, which is just going to be a few minutes, if you have questions for me regarding CCNA, anything in the CCNA technology range, that would be wonderful. If you want to ask me a direct question right now real quick, just do me a favor, do an @KeithBarker, and that way it shows up on my screen and I can see it and answer it appropriately. And that'll be just for new questions as of now. So if you asked one like 15 minutes ago or something that's already scrolled past, please do me a huge favor and just resubmit it and tag me in the front of it. All right. Yeah. One of the questions that was asked was, what am I working on at CBT Nuggets? Behind me, let's see where it is in the camera. Right there. I've got 4 rack servers from Dell that I've had for a while in preparation for the new VMware. So VMware, the VMware Certified Professional 2021 with vSphere 7, with vCenter Server Appliances and ESXi Host and vMotion and vSAN and NFS file services on top of vSAN. All that is what I'm making at CBT Nuggets right now, including labs. So there'll be labs at CBT Nuggets for those as well. So you go through a section of videos on vSAN, then you configure vSAN. You go through a section of videos regarding networking with distributed switches, where I walk you through it all, and then you do the hands-on lab. It's great. I think it's gonna be great. Okay, Eric's asking me, how do you Discord me on, or how do you DM me on Discord? So there's a link in all my videos here on YouTube. There's a link in the description about joining me on Discord. It's an invite. So you join me, and then I'm the OG of IT, Keith OG of IT on my Discord server, and you just find my icon and right click and say message. And that shows up in my queue, and I check that 2 or 3 times, maybe 2 times a week to catch up and make sure. So if you DM me and I don't get back to you in a day or two, don't worry, it's still sitting there waiting for me. Also, if you have questions that don't need my attention, we have like 7,000 plus members as of today's date that are all there learning, studying, or have studied and graduated. I want to give a shout out to Paul, who last week took his exam and passed it for CCNA. Way to go. Keep on studying, keep on learning, and keep on helping others. All right. Let me take a look at the questions real quick. All right. Nick is asking a question about OSPF with a what if, with an up-down scenario. So if you want to put that in the above CCNA section on Discord, that'd be great. So for CCNA, they're not going to get too tricky with you regarding this guy has a interface priority for OSPF set to 0, and this guy has it set to 10. And what's going to happen? It's more like, how does it work? Pretty plain Jane vanilla. How does it function? And then they can add the additional tricks and tips and what ifs in CCNP and CCIE. All right, let's see what else here. Oh yeah, Snare's asking, for the router ID selection, does the other interface include a tunnel interface? Yes. If we have a GRE tunnel interface and it has a layer 3 IP address assigned to it, that would qualify. Any interface that has a layer 3 IP address, IPv4 address, would qualify. If we don't have a loopback and we haven't configured the router ID. Great router ID. Great question. When would a small business implement OSPF? Okay, an example would be great. If you're a really small business, you've got one network, right? Just one little network, and it's connected to a router that goes out to the internet. That little router does DHCP services and NAT and PAT and everything else, and you're done. So if you have like 2 or 3 subnets in your organization, subnetworks, then you'd want to use a routing protocol, because you don't want to have to manually train each router on how to get to. Well, if you have one single router and it's directly connected, it doesn't need a routing protocol. So if you had multiple subnets and 2 or 3 or more routers, and you want them all to train each other on how to forward in your network and do it dynamically, that would be a great case for a routing protocol like OSPF. If you're using Cisco gear, you could just use EHRP, which is done very, very fast, very quick, but it's not an open standard. So OSPF, if you're in a service provider environment, they're using OSPF and or ISIS for their link state routing protocols, and that's an example of when it would be good. So if you only have one router in your environment, even if it has several networks, you don't need a routing protocol because that one router is directly connected to all those networks, and those go in the routing table as directly connected networks. All right, let's see here. Hank is asking, is there a version of Packet Tracer that has a working version of the wireless LAN controller? No, there isn't. So I have a couple labs for the wireless LAN controller. If you go to thekeithbarker.com, and I'm just making sure I'm talking the right camera, I am. And you go to thekeithbarker.com, I've got a whole bunch of Packet Tracer labs. I've got some with the wireless LAN controller. I had to get very creative with the VLAN tagging and the native VLAN, so I made it look and feel very much like a lot of that functionality is happening from the wireless LAN controller going out. But from a practice perspective and from like a 98%, this is how it would work in the real world, it's close to that as far as the CCNA level. So check out that Packet Tracer lab. Let's see what else. Okay, Sid's asking, does the ACL get applied to when used in a NAT statement? So an access control list is used for like 5 things. One of those could be filtering, where you put it on an interface with the IP access group command. It says, I'm going to let this in or I'm going to let this out based on the direction it's applied as a bodyguard. Oh, I'm not going to let that in or out. That's for filtering purposes. But you can also use an access control list to identify traffic that you want to be NATed or PAT. And so you create the access list, but for NAT and PAT, you don't apply it to an interface as far as the access list. Instead, you use that ACL as part of your syntax for an IP NAT statement. So IP NAT inside source list 1, pointing to your access control list, you may be translated. So, and then QoS, and then also for route manipulation with things like BGP and routing protocols. So access control lists, even though they're called access control lists, they're not always used for access control. They're oftentimes used to just identify traffic that then other applications such as NAT and PAT could go ahead and use. All right, let's see what else. All right, we have some people who are heading out in different time zones. Welcome. I'm glad you're here. Thank you. And Newly's asking, let me scroll up here real quick. Thank you for everything. My question, what do you think would be the best cert to go after the CCNA? Great question. If you have a CCNA is a great starting point, and if you want one before that to warm up to it, the Network Plus from CompTIA is a decent vendor-neutral kind of overall certification. Here's what I would do. If I got my CCNA, I was brand new, I would get myself some type of service to do, a job or volunteer. And I would find anybody who needs any help with anything network related, and I would offer my services. I'm dead serious. It could be a faith-based organization. It could be a YMCA group or some kind of community organization. It could be a school, assuming they let you go and do the thing. It could be your neighbor, if they trust you, because you're going to have their passwords and stuff. But get hands-on practice with whatever. It doesn't have to be Cisco gear, but get the hands-on practice, because it's like whenever we throw ourselves at anything, it's just a world of troubleshooting. That's what my world is. And as I work with networks, and ever since, like 1985, 1986, when I first got into IT, it's all about troubleshooting. This doesn't work, or that doesn't work. I better learn about that. Oh, now that works. And then as you get more and more things to work, there's still going to be problems where things don't work. And that's where the engineers and technicians and service desks come into play. So I would say right after a CCNA, or even during, get some experience, even if it's free service that you're giving to other people, get some practice in applying the concepts like IP addressing, DHCP, and everything else. Most home networks have all those things going on, and then get some hands-on practice. And then I would say, based on what you love to do, like if you love Cisco and you want more Cisco, perhaps a CCNP certification could be your next stepping stone. But if you're in an organization, like if you work for, or if you're in an environment, you go to Indeed.com or Monster.com or Dice.com or some other job searching site, and you're searching for jobs in your area, and it seems like there's a ton of people who want experience or who are looking for support with F5. Like, you mean like the key on the keyboard? No, like the company, like Big IP F5. Or if somebody's doing virtualization with VMware, and they're looking for that. Or if somebody's looking for, Citrix and their product, or possibly Checkpoint or Palo Alto. So you could actually find out, what they're looking for, and then take a peek and see if those interest you. Now, if people are looking for programmers and that's not what you want to do for a living, I wouldn't pursue it. But so for the next step, I would say get experience and then find something that is relative or relevant in your area geographically. Or because as an entry-level job, unless it's just like the service desk, it's very likely that you can't have a really great paying job that you can work remotely at. So take the entry-level job, do a great job for it, and then move on. Just the secret is, I had a coach once. His name was Ted Hernandez. This is back like at Mastering Computers back in like the 90s, I think, maybe late 80s. And he said, Keith, it's a lot like, studying and learning and getting better at anything is a lot like football. I said, what do you mean football? He said, well, in football, I'm not a football player, but he was, I'm assuming based on the story. He said, you just have to get ready for it to hurt a little bit, right? When they line up and they snap the football and they run and they hit people, there's going to be some pain involved. And his idea was you just have to kind of understand that there's going to be some effort involved and just get past that so you can focus on getting better and better and better. That is how life works with learning things. I'm 57 and I am still learning and relearning and then, increasing my skills as I go through. So the secret is just never stop learning. And if there's no jobs or if there's a huge, worldwide condition going on or whatever else, don't stop. Just keep on going. Keep on going. Just get better and better. And what you'll find is that we're not really comparing ourselves against everybody, but what you may start to discover is that as you are just consistent and plugging away and making progress, you might notice that the world around you is not making the same progress that you are making. And that's because most of the world, unfortunately, is not willing or not able, based on their circumstances, to, take it forward. So we all come from different walks of life and different backgrounds and different experiences, and life is not fair. But I can guarantee you this, if you make an effort to do a little better and to keep practicing and keep on your path, it's going to be better for us if we do that than if we just sit there and say, well, I can't do it. All right. Okay. Hank is asking or stating, whoa, Keith, one more question. For the last day before taking the exam, do you recommend relaxing, watching a video, or studying hard? What is your strategy? Hank, I've got a strategy that is not very good on the system. And my strategy is cram the stink out of that last day. I know other people say, just relax, have a drink and, or whatever, and just, take it easy, clear your mind. Not me. I would just hammer it. So that means that up to that point, I've been studying and I've gone through the blueprint. I've identified all the pieces that Cisco wants me to know. And I've ranked myself on those and feel like I'm pretty good with this. And for the last piece, I'd say, or for the piece that I was weak on, I would probably go and cram those. Cramming meaning I'd probably lab it up. Like, okay, HSRP. What is the default MAC address? I can't remember. Let's lab it up. Boom, boom. There's the MAC address. Okay, I got it. I understand what that looks like. I understand how it works. And I would cram. I did that for my CCA. I did that for my first CCA as well. What happened was it was during a time change. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, here. So what happened was I got my first CCA in January of 2001. Anyway, the clock in the hotel room was an hour off. And so back then it was a 2-day exam. So we went for the first day. And then if the second day you go back in and you wait in the lobby. And when you come back in, if there's a book at your desk, you get to continue. If there's no book, you have to go home. So it was a 2-day event. And I remember that. So the first day, I was just, I have a video, you can watch the whole thing, but it was pretty brutal. And so I was concerned that I wouldn't be able to continue the second day. And that night, I set the alarm. This is 2001, so I didn't think I had a smartphone at the time. I set the alarm on the actual clock in the hotel room for like 6 a.m. And I think the exam started back at 8. So I was going to give myself a little time. And the clock was an hour off. So I actually woke up, what I didn't realize at the time was 5 a.m. So I got up and I was cramming. I was like, getting ready to go. And I guess I looked at some other timepiece that I had and realized, I've got another hour. And so I spent that hour cramming on, I think it was IPX or something else that I wanted to brush up a little more on. And for me, if I cram, it just helps keep things more current that I've already studied. Now, not studying it all and then cramming, not too helpful. So I don't know if that's going to work for everybody, but that's my nature. I'm just a nervous, last minute kind of guy. But but it's good. So Noli's asking, what are GRU tunnels for? Come see me in Discord or ask that in the Beyond CCNA question. Be happy to talk about that. It's basically an overlay that you can put on top of an existing network. All right. Eduardo, you are very welcome. Brazil's in the house. Glad you're here. Let me see if there's anything else. Okay. Okay, so for people who are really serious about, let's have a come together meeting. I like hardware, I do, but it doesn't make sense to just buy a whole rack of hardware if you have to pay for it. And I'm saying he gives it to you, great, take it. But I've got outside that door, I've got a pile like over 6 feet, maybe close to 7 feet tall of gear, routers and switches and firewalls and other devices that I just rarely ever plug in anymore because I can virtualize all of it. And for CCNA, all we need is packet tracer. But what I also did, and I do a few wireless videos, I know I did this in the last year with the help of the admins on Discord and little excitement. I went out on eBay and I bought a used wireless LAN controller. I bought a couple of very inexpensive access points. And that way I can lab it up and actually look at the real interface, or I can use a virtual LAN controller and then talk to the physical APs. So although if you're studying for a CCNP or CCNA, packet tracer with the wireless LAN controller is more than enough because it's going to show you the interface and walk you through the logic. So if you really want to, on devices like an access point with wireless signals to really have that real experience, you actually need the live gear. But that's an exception, not the rule. Okay, let's see what else. What about when we went to a lab for Checkpoint? Is there anything like Packet Tracer? So for Checkpoint, a software, I love Checkpoint. Checkpoint is a great firewall, a great security company. And so you'd want to virtualize that. So you could launch that, install it. I think they give you like 15 or 30 or 60 days free if you just install it right from the disk with most of the features available. And then after the evaluation expires, you have to reinstall it again. So you can do that in, I think GNS3 supports that. I know EVNG supports that. And maybe Cisco Modeling Labs will let you bring that in. I'm not sure about that one, but that would be, for technologies like that, you need to emulate it or buy a baby bear version of their product, or you could also buy their appliance in the cloud. So if you're familiar with Amazon Web Services or Azure, there's usually appliances from those vendors that you can purchase and then use in the cloud as well. All right. Okay, and Nilsson, congratulations, and thank you for the encouragement for everybody else on the channel. Yeah, Mark is saying, I got to your CCNP STP video where you smash your finger. The fingernail still looks like it's messed up. So there we go. So I've actually smashed that same finger twice. I did it once like 3 years ago, and then again a year ago. I'm kind of clumsy. So thank you for noticing. All right. Thank you, Kelvin, for the moderation. You're a great man, and happy birthday, early birthday for tomorrow. Okay, let's see what else. DevOps questions and stuff, take that to Discord, or if you want to follow somebody who's great with DevOps, there's IP0, maybe it's Subnet 0, John McGovern, and also Knox Hutchinson, which is Data Knox. Those are two great guys that focus on automation and DevOps. And I'd turn your attention there for those guys. Yeah, and Michael's asking for the IP address selection for the router ID. Is it the highest IP on a layer 3 interface or an active layer 3 interface? And I would say to that, for CCNA, you wouldn't need to know that, but I would encourage you to lab it up and find out. That way you can, in Packet Tracer, you could bring the interface down, right? That had our highest IP address, have it down, start OSPF, and see what the router ID is. And that way, at least in Packet Tracer, you'd know. And if you have live gear, you could try that as well. And that way you'll know for sure. But for CCNA, you won't need to know about, what if the interface isn't up? So I have a guess on that, but I would say lab it up to verify. All right. Nilsson is talking about Encore, and my best wishes to everybody. Let's see if there's anything else for me before we kick out of here. Another question saying, should I spend time doing CCNP? It depends. If study something, get better at something. And if it's Cisco, the direction you want to go, great. Like if I live in a Switch Communications, they have a data center, a huge data center, like 4 miles that way. And so if I wanted to get a job at Switch Communications, I would focus on the technologies that they're using to manage their data center, which includes a whole bunch of BGP because they're a service provider and they do hosting and all that stuff. So just identify what you want to focus on, because the world does not run like 100% on Cisco. They are a big player, but they're just one. So learn the fundamentals and then focus on whatever else you love and would be in demand. Okay, what's the topic, Eric's saying, for next Sunday? I'm going to crowdsource that. I'll put a poll out in the next several days on Twitter that's going to ask with a visual representation of 4 choices. The one that gets the majority vote will be for the office hours on Saturday and also for the quiz on Sunday. All right. Thank you, Kelvin. Let's see what else. All right. Michael's asking about a very tough task, and that is filtering routes in an OSPF in the same area and a bit beyond CCNA, but every router in the area has the exact same copy of the link state database. In English, that means every router knows about everything. So if you don't want a single router to know about that, take them out of the area, or you could also do some really creative and CCNP and IE level techniques to filter that route from making it from the link state database into the routing table. But that is way, way beyond what they're going to be asking you about. So yeah, everybody in the same area has a copy of the entire link state database for OSPF. And Mohammed Mouhamedou is asking, can I take a session with you? And the answer is yes. If you're studying for CCNA and you're studied the blueprint, you've studied all the topics for most of them, and you just want clarification on one specific area right from the blueprint, like OSPF routing or layer 2 switching or whatever it is, DM me directly on Discord and let me know what you'd like to focus on. And then I'll work with you on scheduling a time. We'll do it in the Discord server. We'll invite the world. So maybe we'll have like 40 or 60 people show up. That's how big the world is. And then we'll go over those technologies. And what it'll be me asking you questions about, what do you know about this? And then having, get some feedback from you, and then maybe probing a little bit, and then giving you some additional explanation to make sure you really understand it. So I'm available. Please take me up on it. All right, let's see what else. Okay, continuing to go down. And Rob's asking me about Sophos. I haven't touched Sophos in about 4 or 5 years, but when I did touch it, I loved it. It was very, very good stuff. And let's see. And DX Ibo is asking, how important is BGP? For the CCNA, administrative distances and how routes get into the routing table would be important to know regardless of where it came from. And so from a BGP perspective, the administrative distance would matter about controlling the routing table. And for the internet, BGP is important because that's what we use on the internet. Oh no. Zuber is saying 500 million Facebook users hacked. I'll look into that right after our discussion with Kelvin coming up. Okay, I'm not going to be doing any Palo Alto firewall sessions on this channel. It's all for CCNA these days. That's probably where I'll keep it. I do have some Palo Alto content, a little dated, on CBT Nuggets, and we're probably going to be updating that soon. But this channel, mostly CCNA and basic core fundamentals of routing and switching with Cisco. All right, and let's see if there's anything else. Yeah, Arita's asking me about troubleshooting for OSPF. I think troubleshooting is great, and I would do, if you have a scenario like that, lab it up, and if it's not working, you can always save a packet tracer file with that whatever stuck. He's talking about a stuck state. And then if you want to DM it to me, or DM it to the group on Discord and say, hey, I've got this problem with this packet tracer lab. Can somebody take a look? Now, here's what you don't want to do. If you have homework from Netacad, please don't ask other people to do your homework. That's not really a great thing. But as far as general labs and practicing and troubleshooting, use the community. Okay. All right. That's it. Let me go ahead and switch over here. Thank you for joining me. It's been great. I just love spending a few hours every week with the office hour on Saturday, 10 a.m., and also with the live stream on Sundays at 11 a.m. Pacific time. Adjust your calendars. Many people have decided to include in their study schedule, which hopefully everybody has. If they're studying for CCNA, pluck down those 2 hours. Saturday, 10 a.m. Pacific, Sunday, 11 a.m. Pacific, to join the office hour discussion and then the following quiz on that day, and also take advantage of the playlist. And that's all I have to say. So thank you very much. I'm going to be jumping into the Beyond CCNA voice chat room on Discord, as Calvin has volunteered some of his time today to talk about application programming interfaces, the way a computer program can interact and talk to another device, like a Cisco device, with netconf and or restconf, depending on which one is supported on that device. So I'll be there in a few minutes. I'm going to take a little break to get a drink and maybe something else really quick, and then I'll be in that room as well. So until then, have a great rest of your day, and we'll see everybody next time. Bye for now.